Hi guys, if you're new here, my name is Sam and I make videos about makeup, chronic illness, whatever I want. And today I am going to talk about how to prep for a doctor's appointment. Now, this might seem kind of obvious. Some of you, maybe you're new here, maybe you're not chronically ill and you're just like, how hard is it to prepare for a doctor's appointment? You just show up and fill out the forms, and that is not necessarily true. You can do that, but to make the most out of your time, your doctor's time, your nurse's time, this provider's time, as well as yourself, I have some tips and tricks. So the first thing is make sure you have a list of anything you take. Over-the-counter medication, Tylenol, ibuprofen, aspirin, Motrin, whatever. Vitamins, supplements, anything you're taking, collagen, you're taking vitamin C, you're taking whatever, and any kind of prescription medication. Make sure this is all in a list, because while you might not think it's a big deal that you take collagen or vitamin D or Tylenol, it can interact with other medications, something they may prescribe, and some things can interfere with blood work, like taking too much Tylenol too frequently can cause like an issue with like kidney enzymes. So these are all things you want to be very clear with your provider about. So if something comes back abnormal or they want to prescribe you something, they have this list right in front of them of what interactions there may be, or if a test result is kind of bizarre. Also, while you fill out the thing, like the paperwork, or you fill out a little tablet where it's like, are you still taking this, and you remove it. I have learned that no matter who your provider is, that system is garbage. Like the hospital system is garbage. It doesn't actually work. My providers complain about it all the time on how you take the time to update it and it just doesn't update in the system. It won't remove old medications. It'll tell you something you took one time, like you took a steroid 6 years ago. That will still be in your chart no matter how many times you or your nurse or your doctor has removed it. So it's just really helpful to be able to hand them a list. I get thanked all the time by the nursing staff for them to be able to just look down the list and cross-reference it without you trying to remember, especially if you are chronically ill and you take multiple things, and them trying to pronounce some of this stuff, because let's be real, I can't pronounce it, they can't pronounce it, nobody's pronouncing it, unless you're a pharmacist. The next one is have a list of the reason you're there, especially if it's more than one thing. I guess it's not a list if it's one thing. You know what I mean. It's really easy to forget all of the things you might want to mention. Let's say it is like you're having sinus pain and your knee hurts. Now, some providers might be weird and you can't talk about more than one thing, but if you can, you might get on the subject of your sinus pressure or your sinus pain and completely forget your knee has been bothering you. So it's nice to just have this list to either hand to the doctor or just so you remember key bullet points. Also, it could also be just be checking in with something you have already been diagnosed with. Like, let's say you have migraine and you are technically there for your physical, but you also want to mention that your migraine medication maybe isn't working so much. Just have that stuff written down. And to kind of sidebar or branch off of that, have a list of your symptoms. It's also incredibly helpful. When I was suffering with the anemia and did not know it was anemia, I just wrote down a huge long list of all my symptoms. I went into my new primary and I was like, I have seen so many specialists. I have talked about this with my last primary. Here are all the things that are wrong with me. I don't know what to do. And she asked if she could run some more tests, and that's how we figured out, the anemia was actually causing majority of those symptoms. So rather than rapid firing them off verbally and your provider trying to absorb and write them down, it is kind of nice to just hand them that piece of paper and they can either type it down, they could keep it to put it in your file, they could scan it in, whatever. I like to sort mine into like the most bothersome to the least bothersome if you have a lot like I did, just so if they don't have time or they're a little overwhelmed, you can address the things that are affecting your quality of life first and foremost. The next tip is if you're seeing a provider who doesn't have access to like a MyChart or digital charting thing where they can see past test results, either take a screenshot or print off your test results. when you're seeing a new doctor for the first time, they can't do that thing where they order blood work to be completed before you come in so you can talk about any of those results. So it is helpful, especially if you've had blood work recently, to have those to show like, oh, I had this done 3 months ago, here were their results, and they can make decisions based off that. I saw a couple providers during my whole journey with, you know, the anemia and the celiac disease, where I just took everything because I was like, I don't know if you can see this, here's everything binder clipped together, all the test results I've had in the last 6 months, all my symptoms, everything. And I just like handed them a packet basically, which really helped because they were able to rule in or rule out things they wanted to retest, things they wanted to check, illnesses that don't fit the criteria, stuff like that. Next tip is be honest. It's really easy to get white coat syndrome and kind of downplay your symptoms and say, oh, like I'm feeling fine. But doctors function on being literal. So if you say you're fine, they're going to take you at your word and just think that you're fine. Even if you're not. They're not here to be your mind reader or figure out like what's happening. If you're in pain, say you're in pain. If you have X symptom, like be honest about it, because that's the only way you're going to be able to get any kind of treatment or any kind of answer is if you're honest with your providers. Also, a good doctor, a good nurse, a good medical professional is not going to judge you for your honesty. If you say no, like I'm in so much pain or I'm so exhausted I can't exercise, they're not going to say tisk tisk. Like they're here to help you. These ones are a little less about your provider and more about your appointments in general. First one is make sure you're hydrated. It is very important, unless you have a very easy vein to get to make sure that you have had enough fluids. So if they decide to do any labs, it is an easy poke and you're not miserable from them having to fish around, and their job is easier because they're not trying to find a vein that is hiding from dehydration and also removing sludge from your body because it's just so thick from dehydration. The next one is take something to do. You're gonna be there a while. If you don't go to the doctor very frequently, you do not realize how long you're waiting sometimes, and it is no fault of anybody. Sometimes the patient before you is a little more complicated than first thought and they need an extra care. Sometimes hospital systems overbook their providers. Sometimes just something comes up, an emergency, what have you. You don't know. Sometimes you're waiting 10 minutes. Sometimes you're waiting 2 hours. You don't know. So it is best to take something to do and maybe a snack. I learned that lesson. I forgot to eat and my provider was running incredibly late. I was hangry. So make sure to take something that entertains you, whether that's headphones, a book, both. I have a cheap pair of like gummy headphones that I keep in my purse at all times for that reason. I have a Kindle that I could take with me, and yeah, it's just super helpful. I don't know, maybe you want to take knitting or whatever your hobby may be, but have something to do so you're not miserable while you're waiting. Next tip is dress in layers. This might sound weird, but a lot of people with chronic illness have issues with temperature regulation. And if you're new here, you might not exactly know yet that you have an issue with temperature regulation. So you'll thank me later for this tip. You're going to be here for a while. So you want removable or addable, is that a word? Layers. Doctors' offices are rarely temperature regulated. They're either way too hot in the winter or way too cold in the summer. So make sure you are prepared for that. Dressing in layers in the winter, you know, you have your coat and whatever on. Make sure under that you don't just have a sweater. You have something like a hoodie over a t-shirt because you're probably going to want to remove all the layers till you get down to the t-shirt. In the summer, you might get very cold and want to add a hoodie or sweater. So do not judge it by the outside temperature. Offices and hospitals are nowhere near the outside temperature. And my last tip for this is have a general idea of your schedule. So I personally have specific days that I make my appointments on. And this has been really helpful because I do not drive. I cannot drive. So the people who take me to my appointments, I know that these days work with their schedule, and so I always make sure to make appointments on these days. It also helps with anything else that comes up. If it's, say, on a Wednesday, nope, I always make my appointments on a Wednesday, so I know I don't want to do anything to keep that open. So this helps you by saying XYZ days I have open after ABC time. Not everyone has this flexibility, I realize, especially if you work something like retail where your schedule is just all over the place. But if you do, it's very helpful to have a specific day where you do these things. That way you know that if somebody wants to schedule 6 months out, you could be like, do you got a Friday appointment? And you know your schedule is going to be clear because Fridays are only for appointments. This is especially helpful with brain fog because I know I'm not going to have a random appointment on a Tuesday because Tuesday is not a day I make appointments. So I know that if I have an appointment coming up, it's going to be on this specific day. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any tips or tricks for preparing for a doctor's appointment, please let me know down below. It would help me and the other viewers. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I will see you guys next time.